Oh, that should do. Hello, Jacksonites, and so this is definitely unexpected, surely. So apologies for a couple of things. One, last week there was no videos, obviously, because hang on. Jesus Christ, it's a new fucking year, and I'm still trying to figure my shit out. Um, last week I had some family business to attend to, just some family members that I haven't seen in a long time that wanted to come see my son. So whatever. Had to go see them. I had a good time, but the main reason, so that's the first reason I had some family business. But the main reason why there was no videos last week is just because honestly, I something happened that I did not expect to happen. I watched a franchise and it didn't leave much impression. I now have rewatched every single Paranormal Activity film, and I thought this series started off strong, but by Paranormal Activity 4, I kind of felt something happening, but I was hoping that as I got through the rest of the movies, it would not continue, but sadly it did. Starting with Paranormal Activity 4, each subsequent film afterwards just didn't really give me much to work with, unfortunately. I didn't have much to say. I didn't have super strong feelings towards them. I just did not have much to work with regarding the rest of the Paranormal Activity movies, including the worst one and the newest one. Which really frustrated me because I thought that this could have been a decent series to start the new year off with, but I just really didn't have much to say other than summing it up in like a 5 to 10 minute summary. So I do have to cut this series short, but hopefully this video today will make up for that. Today, I will be ranking the Paranormal Activity franchise from worst to best. If I have to cut it short, I do figure this is probably the best way to do it because talking about these movies in this format allows me to do that 5 to 10 minute summary format that I was talking about and just give my overall thoughts on the rest of the franchise. Sadly, I don't think that this franchise was well handled for a good chunk of time. Not quite as bad as the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but still. I'm a little disappointed that I was not able to make a full-on series out of this franchise, but again, hopefully this makes up for that. Because I don't know about you guys, my double feature of Paranormal Activity 3 and 4, I was not very satisfied with afterwards. Talking about 3 was okay, but if you guys couldn't tell, I think I was really struggling to come up with stuff to talk about for um, Paranormal Activity 4. And that's just because it's a very unremarkable movie. But that's beside the point. So today, like I said, I will be ranking all 7. I will be including the newest movie. And there is an 8th film on the way. So when that comes out, I'll be sure to check it out and give my thoughts on it in some way, shape, or form. But today I will be ranking all 7 Paranormal Activity movies from worst to best. I'm gonna try to say a good chunk about the ones that I have not seen or that I have not reviewed, excuse me. But still, don't expect this to be a super long video. So at the very bottom of the barrel, before we begin, word from our sponsor. At the bottom of the barrel, the worst of this entire franchise, without a shadow of a doubt, is 2015's Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension. God damn, was this movie just a complete failure. It's very disappointing. as a finale. It's very unsatisfying as a finale. It commits a huge sin that some finales have done in the past, where it tries to wrap up all of the franchise's storylines and it tries to give clues, context, and answers to a lot of questions that the franchise asks over the course of its run. And in the process of answering those questions, it commits the sin of raising even more questions. And also at this point, I noticed this when listening to James and Chelsea's review of this for their podcast on the channel Dead Meat. But this felt very much like a studio mandated paranormal activity movie. It has all of the tropes of a paranormal activity film, but they don't feel super important or significant. They feel like, okay, this is the format of the paranormal activity movie. Let's just have this format, but make it a finale. That doesn't work, especially when the previous movie did a lot of different stuff. And then to have that quote unquote course correction and backtracking that the studio did to this movie, it just feels kind of jarring because, very brief minor spoiler. I actually have a lot of good things to say about the fifth movie, surprisingly. But in that movie, seemed to be more in a step in the right direction for making the series more entertaining. But then you come back to this, and it feels like such a backtrack downgrade. This movie also has very weak scares. Um, there's barely any suspense. Um, the jump scares that we do have, none of them are super scary, and none of them are super effective. They're just very blatantly obvious, blatantly telegraphed jump scares. And sure, they make you jump, but they don't really scare you. They're just it's a just a boo scare. That's it. There's no weight, there's no threat, there's no substance to the jump scares. It's just hollow jump scares and it's lame. And back on the subject of unanswered questions, the biggest question of all, well, two of the biggest questions, at least as far as I'm concerned, one of the biggest questions is what the hell happened to Hunter after the events of Paranormal Activity 4? We don't know. I don't know. I watched the movie and I still don't get it. We see Hunter in one brief scene from a VHS tape that was recorded back in 1992. And Hunter looks like he's maybe 7 or 8 years old. Yet he was born in 2005. And as the movie before this establishes that time travel is indeed a thing. So, yeah, I guess you could say that time travel could explain why he was there, but that's it. Hunter is seen for only one brief moment. The characters point him out as a missing kid, and that's it. The movie never explains how did he get there? Why is he there? What happened to him? Is he dead? Is he alive? Is he a vessel for a demon? The movie never answers that question. Another question, what the hell happened to Katie? Katie is mentioned by name only once in this movie, but Katie is nowhere to be seen whatsoever in this film. Not counting all of the VHS tapes from the 80s and 90s showing young Katie and Christy, although it's very obvious that they have two different actresses, at least for Katie, maybe not for Christy, but definitely for young Katie, there's clearly a different actress. Another big question is how did the midwives cult come to be? And why is Toby trying to get a human body when he's a demon? He has immortality and unlimited power as a demon, yet becoming a human, that doesn't really make sense for the cult's endgame. Um, This is just a very unsatisfying, uh, unlikable, unpleasant, just poorly made piece of crap movie. This is not a satisfying finale to the Paranormal Activity franchise. And as a finale, it fails because it doesn't really feel like a finale. It just feels like another Paranormal Activity movie that just so happens to be the end of the original series. Oh, and the big gimmick that this movie has of having a special ghost camera that is able to just show all the ghosts. Now, that actually, in concept, isn't necessarily a terrible idea because I will admit that, yes, even though at this point, just seeing invisible forces knock around chairs and beds and tables at this point probably was getting a bit boring. So, showing the ghosts probably could have been cool. But unfortunately, what they execute as the ghosts in this movie are incredibly lame. It's Venom symbiote ghost goop, as James and Chelsea calls it. It's not threatening. It's not scary. It's not spooky. It looks kind of cool, but it's not scary, and it's also just kind of lame. It's cool, but at the same time, it is lame because it's a cool visual, but all it does is just stand there and look ominous and spooky, and not really. And not to mention, too, this movie has a major overuse of CGI. And while I do defend CGI as a special effect, I do not, however, think that CGI is a good special effect to use for found footage films. Because, in my opinion, CGI really sticks out like a sore thumb when it's used in great amounts. And in this movie, they use it a shit ton. Toby's demon form is a CGI Imhotep mummy slash exorcist face. And it's just kind of lame and stupid and sticks out like a sore thumb. This movie's just a mess. It was delayed, I think, twice from a 2013 release to being released in 2015. And it was heavily marketed as being the big finale to the Paranormal Activity franchise. And it does not satisfy. And it's no wonder that this is actually, I don't know how successful the newest movie was, but uh, as that I know of, the Ghost Dimension is the lowest grossing Paranormal Activity film in the franchise. It's not hard to see why, because this movie is just a failure. Coming in at number 6 is Paranormal Activity 4. This movie is a complete waste of fucking time. I have seen worse movies, but all the stuff that I said in my double feature still stands true. This feels very disconnected and very isolated from the rest of the Paranormal Activity franchise. It has the weakest scares, the most unlikable group of characters, the weakest story, the weakest camera setup. Um, it just is, and it's also the most boring. Um, Me saying all that, actually, you may be wondering why I put this one spot below the Ghost Dimension. But I will at least say that it is kind of an easy film to watch because it's not, and yeah, it's boring, but because it's so short, you can just kind of breeze through it. But and like I said, it's not unwatchable. I've seen way worse, but in the overall scope of the Paranormal Activity franchise, this is just the one that I have the least to say about, as you can obviously tell, and it's just the one I have the least amount of connection to. But because at least with Ghost Dimension, I have a fair amount to say about it, but it's all negative. But with Paranormal Activity 4, it's kind of something that I think Linkara, of all people, it's something that he said. It's debatable which is worse, something that's bad or something that's very unremarkable. Because at least something that's bad, you can have a lot to say about. But something that's unremarkable, you can really have nothing to say about. And I think that sums up Paranormal Activity 4 perfectly. And, in the scope of disconnected fourth movies, Paranormal Activity 4 is probably the worst. Because at least Alien Resurrection has a lot of really good special effects and funny lines. And Tremors 4 has a well done Western setting, Michael Gross and Blackhand Kelly. This movie, can't really say anything about. So coming in at number 5 is Paranormal Activity Next of Kin, the newest installment in the franchise. I didn't mind this one very much. By no means was it a great movie or a like groundbreaking new quality or new level of quality for the Paranormal Activity franchise. Um, it kind of is a back to basics more so type of story and type of film. It's very much so a standalone sequel. It has very little to maybe even no connection to the previous series because that is what it's labeled as, a standalone sequel. Um but still, and you could also argue that similar to Paranormal Activity 4, Next of Kin very much could have started out as an unrelated script that was turned into a Paranormal Activity film. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. But at least with this movie, it kind of did more stuff that the marked ones was trying to do, but it also introduces a new aspect to the Paranormal Activity mythos, and it introduces a new side and new storyline for the Paranormal Activity franchise to take advantage of. And while again, it's nothing super remarkable, but there's enough here to at least be intrigued about. The characters are a lot more likable. The setting is also a big breath of fresh air. It's in an Amish community out in the middle of nowhere in New York. It kind of has that, not otherworldly, but it's got that culture shock, spooky intrigue. Kind of something similar to Midsummer. And I like satanic cult stuff. That kind of has a creepy, ominous tone to it. There's some beautiful cinematography and beautiful camera work done in this movie. There's some good bits of slow-mo. It is a bit overly cinematic at times, the camera work and cinematography in this movie, but it is still well shot, in my opinion. Unfortunately, though, it kind of is held back by the fact that the main issue with this movie is that a lot of the scary, spooky stuff is saved for the last 35 minutes of the movie, kind of like with Paranormal Activity 2, now that I think about it. But a big difference between, actually, damn, maybe I should. Nah, I'll just leave it where it is. But Next of Kin at least, does show you some decent batshit crazy stuff that happens in the last third act. Um, it also does have a pretty frustrating sequel bait ending. But still, overall, Paranormal Activity Next of Kin, I thought it was decent. It's not a great movie by any means, but it is an improvement over the Ghost Dimension, that's for damn sure. I would like to see, because apparently this eighth movie that's on the way, Oren Pelly is going to be not just producing, but I think he's going to be writing the script for the film. So hopefully it is a big return to form, but I would like to see some elements of this movie carried over into the main continuity. Because that's another thing about Next of Kin. It doesn't feel much like a sequel. It feels much more just like a spin-off in the Paranormal Activity franchise. It doesn't feel like a main installment of the main timeline or main continuity. It feels like a side story. It's interesting, and I would like to see more of that in the main timeline and main continuity. But with it being more like a side story, it also doesn't feel very big, and it doesn't feel very like the stakes. It's the Jurassic Park 3 of the Paranormal Activity movies. That's a good way to put it. Um, yeah, that sums it up perfectly. So yeah, next of kin, it's not a bad movie. It's just a little. After 7 years, I would have wanted just a little bit more, but still could have been a lot worse. Coming up next is Paranormal Activity 2. Now, like I said in my actually no, I'm going to rearrange that. Number 4 is actually going to be Paranormal Activity 3. I was not necessarily disappointed, but I guess that's the best way to sum it up. Because I remember liking this movie a lot more than I thought I did when I first saw this movie. This movie still does do a lot of good things for the franchise, but it really is held back by mainly how damn short it is, how frustrating Julie is as a character, and just how rushed this movie feels. This feels like, because this is the highest grossing movie in the franchise, this really feels like Paranormal, or that Paramount was just drunk off their asses upon the success of the first two movies, and were just throwing everything that they had and just riding a trend with this one. But still, I do defend Paranormal Activity 3 quite a bit. It's a very good prequel. It's a very well made and well constructed prequel. I think it does its best in uh, convincing the audience that this was a found footage movie taking place in the 1980s. I think they do their best to make it look like the 80s and not have it be too big of a stretch of the imagination. Um, While the characters are pretty basic and standard, they are still likable and enjoyable enough to be attached to the movie and get invested in them as characters. The scares are a little bit of a mixed bag, but there are still some good jump scares in this and a couple of good moments of tension. This is when the series started getting a little bit more violent, although ironically it was followed up by an easily the most tame of the Paranormal Activity franchise, but still after that it got kind of gnarly, or pretty gnarly. Um, 3 is just a major mixed bag. Of the 4 that I like, it is definitely my least favorite, but it's still an enjoyable movie. Um, and yeah, that's all I really have to say about it, as you can tell. Coming in at number 3 is Paranormal Activity 2. Mostly kinda just by default, but like I said in my review, this is a very good sequel. It's very well made, it's a very good follow-up to the first movie. It expands on its mythology's lore very well. Um, it shows off its higher production value. It's got a really good cast of characters and a really good family dynamic. It does all of the best things that all the best sequels do, though it really is held back by the fact that it is such a victim to Chris Columbus syndrome. It feels like a carbon copy of the first movie, just with a bigger budget. And in some ways that works, in other ways it doesn't. Because, like I mentioned, if you watch this back to back with the first movie, it feels like more of the first movie. It feels like a Halloween 2, where it feels more like a Paranormal Activity 1.5 instead of a true Paranormal Activity 2. But still, Paranormal Activity 2 is a damn fine sequel and a very good follow up to the first movie. Now, this one is probably the most surprising because when I first reviewed this series back in 2016, I absolutely hated this movie. But I think Trev has a very good point when he says time heals all wounds, talking about movies like Terminator Dark Fate and The Predator 2018, where just give it some time, and I'm sure that either people will see what's good about it or it will find its audience. Well, I gave Paranormal Activity the marked ones plenty of time because I hadn't seen this movie since I reviewed it back in 2016. And yeah, actually, Paranormal Activity the marked ones coming in at number 2, I really actually enjoyed the shit out of. It might have something to do with the fact that I've been watching a lot of stuff that has to do with Latinos. Like I've been watching the new Last of Us show. Pedro Pascal is pretty awesome. I've been watching Narcos. I rewatched Terminator Dark Fate not too long ago. And then I rewatched this movie. So I've been watching a lot of stuff with Latinos in it lately. So maybe it's just that like um middle class or that's stupid, but um it's that good old classic Latino spirit that I really enjoy that was making me really enjoy this movie. And going through the first 4 Paranormal Activity movies, Paranormal Activity, the marked ones, feels like such a big, giant breath of fresh air. We're out of big, spacious, but confined houses. We have more than just a family of characters. There's a whole crap ton of characters in this movie that we can watch and get to know. There's a lot more spooky, creepy, violent shit that's showcased on camera instead of just chairs moving or light bulbs shattering or just ghostly stuff in the background. There's a lot of shit that scary shit that's in your face, blasting at you in the face. Um, this movie does introduce time travel at the very end, but in actually a pretty surprising and freaky ass ending and a good twist. Um, And it does a better job of connecting itself to the main Paranormal Activity series. So this doesn't feel like a spinoff like a lot of Paranormal Activity fans make it seem like it is. I would say this is just a true sequel. Um, Adding new stuff into the franchise and exploring on the mythos of the midwives cult and expanding on the mythos of the series revolving Katie and Christy, mainly due to the fact that Atlee from Paranormal Activity 2 appears in a quick scene in this movie. So that's cool. But still making it feel like it is a part of a bigger whole and not just an isolated incident. And I think this movie has some of the strongest scares since the first movie. The main thing that I think of, there's a scene when the main character, whose name is Jesse, goes down into the basement of a woman who lived next to him, who she was murdered. He goes down into her basement. He sees ghost kids down there, and when he's trying to get out, uh, demonic forces keep him locked inside the basement. So he turns around with his camera and it goes dead silent. And then he sees a shadow move back and forth in front of him. Then he hears this loud, deafening, booming sound like giant, hard footsteps just come barreling towards him. And then there's just a big the demon screech and a Jesse screams, and he's attacked and possessed by something. It's a really, really good scare, and it's really good at activating your fight or flight instincts, in my opinion. So, yeah, Paranormal Activity, the marked ones, is actually a pretty damn enjoyable movie, in my opinion. It does a lot of new things for the franchise. It gets a lot more batshit insane by the end of it. And overall, it's just a lot more entertaining, especially compared to Paranormal Activity 4. I'm just shitting all over Paranormal Activity 4 in this video. Yeah, The Marked Ones is a good movie. But of course, not to be one of those people because I'm a big um, advocate for not always thinking that the first movie is the best. But with this franchise, it really couldn't be any more true. And number one, of course, is the original Paranormal Activity. This is the best of the franchise. It's my favorite in the franchise. It does everything that the rest of the franchise does, and this one does it at its very best. Um, Amazing suspense, great build up, really good scares, an interesting mythology that it introduces, and one of the scariest endings to a horror film that I've ever seen. Paranormal Activity is a very unique, very special movie. And like I've said before, it's one of my favorite horror films of all time. I may enjoy the marked ones just a little bit more because it's just more entertaining. But if you want to sit down and shut off all the lights and turn your phone off and watch a scary, scary movie, the original Paranormal Activity will rock your world. I promise you. So, with all that being said, that's it. That's the end of my Paranormal Activity series. Sorry this was so short, but whatever. So now that that's done, I can move on to something else. So look forward to next time when hopefully I will have a guest for it, but I will be starting up a new series. And I know a lot of people, well, I don't not know, but I'll bet you there are some people that get really irritated when I just keep re-reviewing movies that I've done before. Well, tough, it's my channel. But I know you guys will watch them. Dead or alive, you're coming with me. And I will see you guys in the next video.